Hello, my name is Zan Cancel, and my final project is on detection honeybees. What are detection honeybees? Detection honeybees are honeybees trained to detect specific odors and substances through conditioning processes such as proboscis extension reflex, or PER. I'll explain more about this later. In these training procedures, honeybees are exposed to a target odor paired with a reward or punishment. Over time, they learn to associate the odor with the consequence and exhibit a conditioned response when exposed to the odor alone. How do honeybees smell? Honeybees primarily smell using their antennae, which are finely tuned vapor sensors capable of detecting odor molecules at extremely low concentrations. When an odor molecule binds to receptors on sensory neurons located in the sensilla on their antennae, it triggers a neural response that is transmitted to the brain, where it is then interpreted as a specific smell. Their tongues, also known as proboscis, are primarily used for feeding on nectar and are not directly involved in the sense of smell. However, honeybees can be trained to extend their proboscis in response to certain odors as part of a conditioning process. This conditioning process, known as proboscis extension reflex, or PER, can be used in various applications. In such cases, honeybees are trained to extend their tongues or proboscis in response to the presence of whatever they need to detect, making them effective biosensing working animals. What can honeybees detect? Honeybees can detect explosives such as TNT and C4, infectious diseases like COVID, and drugs like heroin and cocaine. Honeybees are able to detect explosives. In a study by Filippi et al., they used honeybees to detect explosives on landmines. They underwent a conditioning process that involved presenting the honeybees with TNT as the target odor, along with a food reward, in this case, sugar syrup. By repeatedly exposing the honeybees to the target odor, along with a food reward, they learn to associate that odor with the reward, similar to how they naturally associate flower odors with nectar. When the honeybees detect TNT, they stick out their proboscis, or PER. Once the honeybee colonies were successfully conditioned to associate the target to odor with a food reward, they are deployed in a field to search for the odor of explosives, in this case, landmines. Filippi et al. Used detection patterns that were monitored using cameras. These patterns were analyzed to detect honeybee presence and localize potential landmine sites. Here you can see the landmine sites. And on the right, you can see that the camera is showing where the honeybees detected the explosives. Here's a photo from a study done by the Los Alamos National Laboratory. In this box are detection honeybees. Here, the bees are detecting whether there are explosives in the car. This technique has been used so honeybees can detect explosives on people, automobiles, checkpoints, and even over water. How do honeybees detect infectious diseases? In a study by Contos et al., they used honeybees to detect SARS-CoV-2, or COVID. Bees were collected and harnessed for experiments. Throat swabs from COVID-infected and healthy minks were used as odor samples. The bees were rewarded with sugar syrup after smelling the COVID-infected odor samples. Honeybees were able to effectively detect COVID-infected samples based on odor discrimination. They would stick out their proboscis, or PER, when COVID was detected. Lastly, honeybees are able to detect drugs. In a study by Scott et al., they trained honeybees to be able to detect drugs like heroin and cocaine. Here, honeybees were trained to detect drugs using a process called negative conditioning, where the bees were trained to associate the scent of a drug with a negative stimulus. In this case, the negative stimulus was an electric shock. These honeybees were exposed to different odors. The odors included a drug scent and a control scent. When exposed to drugs and a negative stimulus, the bees would have an avoidant behavior. Through this conditioning process, the bees learned to avoid the scent of drugs to avoid the negative experience. The use of honeybees for detection have many advantages, including their sensitivity to smell, their size because they are very small, they are unobtrusive compared to dogs, They're inexpensive to maintain, and they're inexpensive to train, and they are self-reproducing. One ethical issue associated with honeybees for detection purposes is the potential harm or stress caused to the bees during training. While honeybees are less obtrusive and invasive compared to other detection methods like detection dogs, there is still a concern for the well-being of the bees involved. As you can see in the photo above, the honeybee is strapped and taped down in a lab. This is far from its natural environment. Some may argue that the benefits of using honeybees for detection, such as their low cost, portability, and effectiveness, outweigh the potential harm to individual bees. However, on the other hand, there are ethical considerations that may arise about the training process. It is clear that the honeybees undergo uncomfortable conditions during training. Some key messages to take away from this presentation include that honeybees are highly effective detection tools that can be trained to detect a wide range of substances, including explosives, infectious diseases like COVID-19, and drugs like heroin and cocaine. Another message is that the primary method of detection used by honeybees is their finely tuned antennae, which are capable of detecting odor molecules at extremely low concentrations, making them highly sensitive biosensors. All in all, honeybees can be valuable working animals for detection as they are inexpensive to maintain, train, and reproduce.